and a lot of members of the Trump team who were guests, including members of the Trump family, either refused to have masks on or took them off as soon as they got there. Is there a risk for people in the audience?
Of course there's a risk, because we're in a pandemic. At our hospital, we haven't had a meeting with more than a handful of people, since March, because we're in a pandemic. And as Dr. Gupta just mentioned, we now know with really greater clarity that this virus is transmitted not just by droplets that can be blocked by plexiglass barriers, but also by aerosols, which can hang in the air and travel on the air conditioning currents. So there's really no reason to have an audience in that room. They should meet electronically. And there is precedence for this. In 1960, the third debate, Richard Nixon was in California, JFK was in New York, the moderator was in Chicago. This was 60 years ago. It should be done now, and not to mention the fact that the vice president is really under quarantine now. He should be home, locked at home for another several days until he fills the 14-day period. There's no reason to have an audience there. There's actually no reason to have anyone there.
And Sanjay, that's kind of a question I have about. This is in the hands of the Commission on Presidential Debates and the Cleveland Clinic. The Harris campaign said today that it's the Cleveland Clinic's job to ensure the health and safety precautions tonight, and, quote, we fully expect that the Cleveland Clinic is going to do their job. To be frank, they didn't do it last time. And I just wonder if you trust that the Commission on Presidential Debates and the Cleveland Clinic, based on what you saw a week ago, are up to the challenge of saying, no, we have to do it this way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm concerned about this, and I'll tell you why. First of all, we reached out to the Cleveland Clinic about their protocols, which I'll tell you about in a second, and they said they're sort of taking their cues from the Commission on Presidential Debates. Talk to the Commission on Presidential Debates, they say we're relying totally on the medical advice of the Cleveland Clinic. Okay, so there's a lot of this going on. But when you look carefully to your question, Jake, about what are the protocols, at least with regard to testing. Dr. Reiner brought up some of the other things, but with regard to testing, they said you have to show that you've had a negative test within the last 72 hours. And just you have to sign an affidavit. You don't have to actually show the test. You're not reviewing the test. So there's that honor system. 72 hours is sort of a strange time frame. We know that you can test negative 3 days ago and test positive a day later or 2 days later. So in this case, they did take PCR tests yesterday, but Cleveland Clinic recommendations were only 3 days. And also the type of test. They said you can have any FDA authorized test, emergency use authorized test, which includes not just the more gold standard PCR test, but also the antigen tests. So it's a really porous system here, and you get the impression that it's not really designed to necessarily catch people who are positive. It's more designed to sort of check some boxes. So I understand what they're saying. I mean, this is the medical protocol Cleveland Clinic put forward. We've reached out to Cleveland Clinic all day to have them better explain to us why they would choose this system. They haven't really gotten back to us on this, but this is the system they have in place, and it's not going to catch everybody by any means.
And Dr. Reiner, this is also a problem because, let's face it, the Trump administration, the Trump White House, they're being opaque about the president's current health situation, and they're still refusing to say when the president last tested negative. This is important because he theoretically contracted the virus on September 26th, a Saturday when they had that event inside and outside the White House for their new Supreme Court nominee. And after that date, on the Sunday, he had an event with Gold Star families. On Tuesday, he went to Ohio. On Wednesday, he went to Minnesota. On Thursday, he went to New Jersey. And we have no idea when he tested positive. And for some reason, the White House refuses to say when he last tested negative.
Right, and I have no confidence that he acquired it on that Saturday, the 26th. He might have acquired it earlier. Look, if you look at the president's clinical presentation, he got really sick on Thursday. Typically, patients get really sick about a week after they develop symptoms. So think of that, a week after they develop symptoms. He was certainly infected and infectious 2 days earlier at the debate. There's another interesting point. The president met with the RNC chairperson, Ronna McDaniel, on Friday, September 25th. 5 days later, she tested positive. Now, it's possible she could have infected the president that Friday, but it's also possible he could have infected her. So we really need to know from Dr. Conley, because he knows the date of the president's last test. We don't have to dig through the National Archives for this. Just tell us when the president last tested negative. It's very important. It's important from a public health perspective.
I've never seen anything like this, and I just have to say, I was told today by an official in the office of the governor of Minnesota that the White House has yet to reach out to the Department of Health in Minnesota. Anderson?
Jake, remarkable. David Axelrod, should the next debate take place?
Well, the question is, if it does take place, should it take place as planned, a town hall meeting with citizens asking questions of the candidates, even if the president is somehow cleared to appear? Should they just go to, as Dr. Reiner was suggesting, a more remote debate, just out of an abundance of caution? That seems like the wise thing to do.
So tonight, I mean, in the final minutes now up to this, it seems like there's a lot, I mean, both sides can make obviously a lot of mistakes. What do you think Vice President Pence has to do?
Vice President Pence has to say that Kamala is a stalking horse for radical leftists in this country, and that Joe Biden is just going to do whatever they tell him. And, and I think she's got to say COVID.
There just saw a shot of Karen Pence, also saw Kamala Harris's husband at the debate hall.
She's got to say, you guys mismanaged this, you lied to us, more than 200,000 people are dead, and this would not have happened under a Biden administration, and she has to be able to defend Joe Biden, because Pence is going to attack Joe Biden. He's going to attack his 47 years in public service. He's going to attack his record, and she has to be the greatest defender of Biden.
They're just now introducing the moderator there.
I just wanted to say something that may be obvious, but it's worth saying. This is a moment of great pride for a lot of people. There are a lot of women of color, a lot of black folks, a lot of Asian folks who are sitting around the TV tonight. Kamala Harris has done a lot of stuff that people don't really know. Behind the scenes, the African American community has rallied behind her in a way because she went to a black college, because she's a member of a Greek letter organization. There's a massive sort of support system that's locked in place behind her. She's representing an awful lot of people tonight. People are very proud of her. People say she's too liberal. We're proud of the fact that she's sticking up for people who don't have health care. We're proud of the fact that she's concerned about climate solutions. She's been a fighter for us in California. She's my senator. She's somebody who I think a lot of people tonight are going to be proud to see her walk out there and make history.
He has to, I agree with Gloria, he has to make the case that Kamala Harris is not a stalking horse. She is the vanguard.
Another Ross, look at
the likely successor. People are looking at both these presidents now as older men, and that this is a serious. These are many times you get aggressive. Joy, I wish maybe it was these two instead of the two at the head. Well, you may get your wish in this case.
Yeah.
Because and I think people are looking at this more seriously, and so Mike Pence has to show he's in command, and tone is going to be very important for him because he's going to go after her on her record. He has to do it in a way that doesn't turn people off. That
Well, they both have that, Jim. They both have that, Jim.
That's a big thing. And secondly, for Kamala Harris, there's a reason as the front runner in the Democratic Party that she didn't make it to Iowa, and she has to reverse course of someone who had very uneven debates going into Iowa, and that's why she fails. Can she execute and deliver a composed, confident message, or is she gonna do what she did during the other? She was all over the place, and you just didn't know what she thought. And that's a real issue.
Shut the fuck up.
As you step back, I think we also ought to note, we're going to have someone on the stage who represents the emerging American majority in politics, and someone who, a white evangelical former radio talk show host from the center of the country, from rural America, and it is very striking to see the two of them sitting next to each other, and that's one of the subtexts of this debate, because they do represent the future.
And they both have to manage this tone stuff. In other words, if a black woman, she comes on too strong, she's angry. Obviously, if Pence comes on too strong, he could come off as sexist. But I think she's going to be able to thread the needle. I think she's done it over and over again.
But Pence really has to defend Donald Trump, and this may be where you and I disagree, Rick, but I think he does have, how many times have we heard Mike Pence say, we stand on his broad shoulders?
Yes, look,
Instead of pointing to our
Mike
shoulders. we stand on his shoulders, and he's got to defend.
No, if he goes out there and defends Donald Trump like he has for the last 4 years, you can mail this in. Look,
Doesn't he have to defend?
Mike Pence is running for president tonight, because the question is not whether these guys are potentially going to be the president. It's when they're going to be the president, right?
When they're gonna
Because these are older men who are not well, and so that if I were Mike, that's how I'd be thinking. I'm running for president right now, and I've got to be my own guy. And if he's out there just apologizing for Trump,
fuck off.
number one, it's not going to help himself, and it's not going to help Donald Trump.
Fuck off.
That's very tough. He is the running mate.
I understand that,
And
but
he's not at the top of
he's
the
got to
ticket.
make the case that Donald Trump didn't effectively make on COVID, and he's got to prosecute the case on Kamala Harris being for stacking the court, be for eliminating private health insurance. Those are big issues that he can hammer.
We are just seconds away. Let's go back to Jay.
Well, we hope that coronavirus is only figuratively present in the debate hall this evening, and not literally present, but it's certainly going to be a major subject, the smog of it all, and the administration's mishandling of it, both when it comes to the national response and also to the fact that the White House is a hot spot.
Yeah. Let's just say, seeing those pictures that we just saw, I'm happy to see that it seems that everybody's following the rules this time. They are wearing their masks in their seat, which is a far cry from what we saw last week. But those atmospherics are going to really frame this debate. The job for the Pence side is going to be, how do you get the attention off of COVID and onto some other things? We're getting
With
some
plexiglass right there.
plexiglass right in front of you. We're already seeing Pence, signaling he's going to be aiming for something that could be a weakness for Kamala Harris. Foreign policy. She's not as experienced in that area as he has become since becoming vice president. So this is going to be a game of cat and mouse here between the two of them.
It will. What's interesting is that in talking to sources in both camps, of course, coronavirus is, as you said, the other, kind of entity on the stage there, unfortunately. And things have changed a lot since the president and his wife and so many other people in the White House have gotten COVID. But when it comes to the substance of what they have been preparing in both sides, it hasn't changed that much. Kamala Harris was always planning on hitting coronavirus incredibly hard, particularly the fact that he is the head of the coronavirus task force. He has culpability. She's going to actually question his competence, of course. And then vice versa. He was always planning on hitting her on her, radical left positions, whether or not that's true, and other things like law and order. And so I think we're going to hear a lot of those issues come up, despite the fact that it feels like we are in such a different world based on everything we've seen this week here in Washington.
And yet I have to say, we are all living through coronavirus, right? We all have kids doing a remote education. We all have parents that we haven't seen in months. And there are questions that Senator Harris could ask Mike Pence that we in the press corps can't get answers to, that illustrate how much the White House has not been straight with the American people. Vice President Pence, when did President Trump last test negative? Because that's relevant, because he's been traveling all over the country, including at the debate a week ago, and in swing state Minnesota, and in New Jersey, and in swing state Ohio. When did he test negative last? Because that's how we contact trace. Why are you violating CDC guidelines? Why haven't you isolated
Or
yourself?
why are you wearing a mask ever?
Yeah, why don't you wear a mask? You're the head of the coronavirus task force.
I do think that, this was brought up a little bit by Kyung Wha earlier in the program, talking about Kamala Harris as a woman, speaking for women, right? This is the election of this enormous, potentially 30% gender gap. And one of the reasons for that gender gap is the perception among women that this is an irresponsible administration. And you will see Kamala Harris trying to drill into that tonight repeatedly, and really tapping into her sense as a stepmom, as an aunt, as a woman herself. And that's going to be part of the challenge that Pence is going to have to face. He can't just bat it away. She's going to be representative of that constituency.
And let's throw it back to Wolf.
All right, guys, thank you. The first and only vice presidential debate of 2020. In the shadow of the coronavirus, a very deadly pandemic, and President Trump's own infection, the Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris, they are set to take the stage for what is going to be a truly, truly historic exchange, perhaps the most important and significant vice presidential debate in American history in the midst of a very, very significant crisis election. Here's Susan Page from USA Today.
Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only vice presidential debate of 2020, sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now, when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you.
He's watching her.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for
A dirty look on his face.
And here's the thing.
He's a dickhead in charge
On
of it.
January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on Earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China, President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resource and support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless Americans.
Shut up!
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's
go. No, but Susan, this is important. I want to, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
Yeah, you have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President a chance to
So I want to ask the American people, How calm were you when you were panicked about where you're gonna get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm
Thank
were
you.
you
Thank
when
you,
your
Senator
children
Harris.
couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to
You know,
respond.
there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made.
I'm
But
afraid.
the reality, if
Shut
I
up,
may
shut up.
finish, Senator. The reality is, Dr. Fauci said, everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd be through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. But that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also
Thank you,
said to
Vice
us if we did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice
Now,
President
one
Pence.
life lost is too
Thank you.
many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York, New Orleans, and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme
He's not
Court of the
answering the
United
question.
States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank you, Vice
But at
President
that,
Pence.
if I may say, that
Fuck off.
there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested
Yes.
for coronavirus. And it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the
Vice
Green
President.
New Deal,
Shut up.
all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader,
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a
Oh.
parent,
There you go.
Not bad. Oh, that's what's the face and him. Anyway, so who's winning?
Oh, it's only just started. Yeah. How you going in there?
Walk this way.
Come and have a look.
You can watch the debate.
No, you can stay there, Chris.
because of the incompetence of this administration, it is asking too much of the people. But it is asking too much of the people. That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect their parents and their
I'm sorry.
children.
Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
That's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
Well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of...
but I would like to go back, because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is just, it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, you know, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the Strategic National Stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud. She must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney in San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose, which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released the sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their President, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination. I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is, we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher. I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates, and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000? And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency, because it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is forthright, but Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
The American people have a president who's a businessman, who's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review, just as the law allows. But The distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vice
And
President.
turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation.
Thank you,
unleashing
Vice
American
President.
energy, fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's
Thank you,
on the
Vice
line
President.
if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good segue into our third
Great
topic,
segue.
which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. It was when Joe Biden was vice president they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of 4 had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hard-working Americans, the average household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think. I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height. We've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris
still would raise
want to
taxes.
raise
Even
taxes.
said that.
They want to bury
They're
our
gonna put it up to
economy with a $2
28%,
trillion
not 21%.
Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth.
Thank you,
and
sir.
opportunity,
Thank
4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021
Thank
is
you,
going
Vice
to be the
President.
biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000
He said
a
he's going to
year.
repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
it'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
That is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he
tax
only
bill-
cutting? Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes.
And it's
we need to get Vice President.
I'd just like to, he interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you. Let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the south. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the west. Do you believe,
All
as
good?
the scientific community
Yeah.
has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger,
Oh, I saw it.
hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging?
You
We
made it?
have 2 minutes.
Hey?
You made it? You tried?
Thank
No,
you.
no, that's right.
Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than.
Is he even
anything
behaving
ever
himself?
recorded.
Yeah, yeah,
Our water is
yeah.
among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the president signed the Outdoors Act, the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? And President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation. And we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes
Shut up.
today than
Thank
there
you.
were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the
Thank you. Fucking get into it.
hurricanes and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
the
Vice
bill of
President
goods of
Pence.
a Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President
American
Pence.
workers
You're a
first.
rude bastard.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings, Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of four across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million American business buildings.
Thank
It
you.
makes no sense. It will cost jobs. President Trump
Thank
is
you,
going to
Vice
put
President.
America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you,
But,
Vice
on the
President.
issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
let's talk about that. The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
You know. I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to.
Well, I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden's been a cheerleader for communist China through over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation,
That's it. Fuck off.
This administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. The Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very quickly.
15 seconds, and
Thank you. Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019. More liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So now with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. And China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was xenophobic. But President Trump has stood up to China. We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship.
you're rude,
level playing field. We're going to hold
Vice
China
President Pence.
accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking
That's true.
at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. And let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. You got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He's walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President, did somebody give you a chance to respond?
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. When President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader al-Baghdadi without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, two of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other Beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
But
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate.
Thank you.
And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President.
terrorism. President Donald Trump was out of the
Thank you,
deal.
Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling
What an arsehole.
to Baghdad,
Thank you,
to do
Vice
harm
President
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you, Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are
The
safer.
fucking woman is weak as
No,
piss.
President Donald Trump will never
Thank you, Vice President
take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length, because of course there are other topics we want to talk
But
about.
I would like equal time.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries, and do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them? Because of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that. Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make sure we have a chance
I really
to
have
talk
to
about.
respond.
Fuck off.
And
Look, she has.
15 seconds, because
Well, I gotta
we're
have
trying
more
to.
than that. Look.
Well, I'm sorry, Vice President,
Look,
but you've
I-
had more time than she's
the-
had
The
so far.
slanders against President
Oi.
Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice
My
President
son is
Pence.
a captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous. Let
Thank
me
you,
also
Vice
say,
President Pence.
the
Vice
American
President
people
Pence,
deserve,
you know,
Susan,
Vice
the American
President
people
Pence, I
deserve to
didn't,
know.
Vice President Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your
and Trump-
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you,
Go right
which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important.
Oh, you asshole!
The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden And Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable. Because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a
And he's not answering the question.
to the Supreme Court of the United
Fucking
States.
maggot.
And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, but we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views. And
Thank you, Vice President.
so
Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place, that
Thank you, Vice
Thank
President.
you. Fuck off.
Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums. Let's lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true leadership.
You know, you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration is supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan, but let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed with the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election. And a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said, it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And
Senator Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about
You
packing.
once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court.
Yeah, where's your
If they
evidence?
somehow win this election.
Where's your evidence?
Men and women, I gotta tell you, people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So, the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I have witnessed the appointments, for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial.
Put him back in his place.
I just want the record to reflect she never
Oh,
answered.
no.
But the American,
Thank
maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question,
Thank you,
but I think
thank
the
you.
American people know that.
Thank you,
Fuck
Vice
off.
President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country, of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail. And we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is a time for leadership on a tragic issue of unarmed black people in America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist. And that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult.
He's gonna fly on
who serve
yeah,
law enforcement.
never shits on you.
Everyone to know, who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day. And President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African American
Thank you,
neighbors
Vice
and
President.
all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership,
Thank you,
we'll
Vice President.
always stand with law enforcement and we'll do what we've done
Vice
since
President
day
Pence,
one,
thank
is
you. Your time
improve
is
the
up.
lives of African Americans,
Thank you, Vice
record
President Pence.
unemployment, record
Vice
investments in
President Pence, your time
education,
is
and we'll
up.
fight for school choice for all of our members.
Thank you, Vice
I'd
President.
like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who was personally prosecuted, everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
Not true.
it wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban on the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed, and on the other side there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs, and Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris.
And recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have
thank
so
you.
much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President.
We fought for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4
Thank you. You know, there's no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
He attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator.
I would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to pose I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, Don Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris
Don't put your fucking ass on it, mate.
The establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military. We revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy. We appointed conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. But when you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was Vice President of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from
You're not answering the question.
Campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting. It'll create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, how are the citizens supposed to get along?" And then she added, "Your examples could make all the difference to bring us together," end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world. I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States. One very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the 2 of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another.
Thank you.
In times of need. And we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through the
Mr. Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be. That is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice, through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall style debate in Miami. We hope you'll join us then. Good evening.
Peace and love.
Well, there you have it, two candidates largely refraining from the fireworks, certainly a contrast to President Trump's performance last week in their first presidential debate. Tonight, it was much more civil. Both candidates clearly did their best to dodge important, serious, tough questions from Susan Page, questions that they didn't want to answer. She asked a very good question, Susan Page, I must point out. And Mike Pence, in the process, also learned that it's nearly impossible to put a positive spin on the administration's record when it comes to coronavirus, with more than 210,000 Americans dead. She scored some points when she said these words: the greatest failure of a presidential administration in the history of our country. The candidates, their spouses, they're on the stage right there. We'll continue to watch. In the meantime, let's check in with Jay.
Thanks, Wolf. Well, I have to say, I think it was, first of all, a normal debate, regular debate, not an emotionally abusive session with somebody who's a little unhinged. Both candidates got in some punches. I thought Senator Harris was effective when going after the administration's record when it came to COVID. Obviously, I thought Vice President Pence going after Biden's record and attacking Harris as on the fringes of her party, which, as we expected, I think there will be a lot that Republicans will be happy to talk about when it comes to his performance. It was more standard. There is, I think, a disparity in terms of some of the unanswered questions. Both of them did a lot of dodging. Harris wouldn't answer the question about the court backing, and that's significant, and Biden and Harris should answer it. But on the other hand, Pence wouldn't answer the question about why the U.S. death rate from COVID is so much worse than any other wealthy country, and he wouldn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power. So while they both dodged questions, I can't help but think these ones that Pence dodged are somewhat more significant.
And I can add another one to that that's very significant. He wouldn't answer how a second term of the Trump administration would preserve pre-existing condition promises that is under Obamacare, which they're trying to do away with in the court. I agree with you. Our hearts are racing a little bit less right now than they were last week. This was much more civilized, but it was really stunning to see the way Mike Pence pivoted almost at every question, not answering the question and not going back to actually follow up on the question. Kamala Harris was more respectful of the questions and tried to answer the questions. I'm not sure if that got her anywhere. I do think at the end of the day, Mike Pence did what he needed to do, maybe and then some, and same with Senator Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we all have covered Mike Pence, we know that this is his superpower as an interviewee. He often just completely disregards the question and answers the way that he thinks is best. But in the context of this debate, it really did create this imbalance between the two of them. And I do think that Harris missed some opportunities here to push back at opportunities when Pence took them, even when it wasn't his turn, and then he was given time to go over by 30 seconds here, 45 seconds there. I mean, these are technicalities, but in the moment, what it means is that you felt like you got more talking time from Pence.
And as interviewers, all three of us, it was definitely frustrating to hear the question and then not hear a follow-up when both of them, but much more, Mike Pence didn't answer the question at all. Went completely in a different direction.
So something also that I think we can't ignore is the concept of gender. And we're so used to seeing white men, but definitely men, on the stage when it comes to being on a ticket. Senator Harris is only the third woman to be on the ticket. The first one was in 1984 with Geraldine Ferraro. Then we had to wait till, I'm sorry, she's the fourth. And then 2008, Sarah Palin, 2016 Hillary Clinton. And I wonder if a woman candidate feels like she can't push as much or steamroll as much as, say, Mike Pence can, for fear of seeming and offending some segment of the electorate. I'm not saying it should be that way, but I'm wondering if it is that way.
Well, I'll tell you this, and Abby, I want to get your thoughts on this. I was texting with a friend who is an African-American man saying, do you think that she's kind of letting some things go in a way that maybe she shouldn't? And the answer was, are you kidding me? You know that she's a black woman. She has to kind of pull her punches on that. And I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, she was tough, and she certainly had her moments. But there were times when maybe there could have been more follow-up, and I don't know if that's something that was going through her head or not. I hope it wasn't.
You know, this is something that I'm sure, you know, for every woman in politics, and particularly black women, there is this line that you have to thread. You know, I was also texting with people close to her, you know, who looked at this and kind of felt like Pence was taking advantage of the rules, of the fact that he was able to just flout them. And perhaps she should have pushed back in certain ways. I think that's where debate prep comes in. There are ways to do it in ways that don't sort of present in a certain way, but this is a line that only women really have to thread.
And in fairness to her, she didn't get a lot of help from the moderator.
She did not.
You know, Susan Page, you know, she was
fucking
very
useless.
thoughtful. She followed the rules, followed the time.
There was a moment where Pence literally said, I've got to finish this point, and then he was allowed to finish his point well beyond his time. I think people saw that back home, and I think there was clearly an imbalance there.
She was very effective, I thought, at the beginning of the debate, when she was just addressing the facts of the coronavirus response and the inadequacy of the administration's response. The very fact that they have to be in a theater with people in the audience wearing masks, separated, plexiglass there. These are just the facts. And she really went after the Pence administration's response. She didn't invoke the fact that the White House is currently a hot zone.
I thought that was one of the most interesting things about the COVID section. The sort of hypocrisy of the Trump administration was right there for Kamala Harris to take advantage of. And she did it, but she chose to do something else, pivoting it back to everyday Americans, their personal experiences with the virus. But when Mike Pence ignored the question about why Americans should follow the CDC rules, when the Trump administration flouted them in the Rose Garden, it felt like there was not any adequate response to sort of illustrate what was going on there. And so I see what she was trying to do. Talking directly to the American people, you know what you've been going through, but at the same time, we are living through a White House coronavirus hotspot, and it really didn't get brought up.
Absolutely, she was preparing, and we all spoke to sources around her to do exactly what she did, which does make sense, to make a connection. Every single person in this country has a connection in some shape or form to coronavirus. But you gave one example. Another example was when Susan Page asked the vice president about whether or not it is our right as American citizens to know about the health of the president. And he completely ignored, I mean, he didn't even come close to answering the question, and nobody held him accountable. Nobody held his feet to the fire. Those are really important questions that we don't really get a chance to ask the vice president, much less the person who wants his job.
Yeah, I mean, there were times during the debate that I thought that the most effective being on that stage to go after Vice President Pence was that fly that landed on his head. And
arguably one of the most interesting things to
sat there for 10 minutes. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. The fly certainly got a lot of attention online.
I noticed it too.
Let's quickly go around. David Axelrod, your thoughts?
You know, my feeling is that they both probably got some of the points they wanted to get in. They both avoided questions, though Pence was a serial evader, but probably left feeling good about the points that he made. She, I thought, clocked him on the biggest issue of the moment, which is the coronavirus, which is how the debate started. But on the bottom line, I don't think this changes anything. This ticket, Biden and Harris were 10 points ahead going in. I'd be very surprised to see much movement in the polls here. And in that sense, it's a good night for Biden. She held her own. The race is where it was. The race is going in his direction right now.
No, I think that Pence made a lot of the points that the administration would want him
Well,
to
this
make.
Sheila, she hates
He
fucking
made them
Trump.
very well because the President of the United States really did not make them well and made no points at all last week. I think Kamala Harris took him on COVID and did that really well. She did not answer the question on court packing, which we know that Joe Biden doesn't want to answer because, as he says, it's a distraction from the question about the Supreme Court. But I'll tell you something else that was interesting to me. We know how Pence feels about Roe versus Wade. Speaking of the Supreme Court, he said he is proudly pro-life, but he didn't answer the question directly on Roe. Did not. Now, the question was asked, what would you do in the state of Indiana? You know, would you then say, okay, you shouldn't have abortions in the state of Indiana?
The abortion
Went
question.
by it, because he knows where American public opinion is. And American public opinion is overwhelmingly saying, don't get rid of Roe v. Wade. So he knew how to evade when he had to evade, and he knew how to shift when he needed to shift. And then I thought one moment that was sort of stunning to me was when he kept using the Pat Moynihan phrase, you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. Are you kidding me? Coming from the Trump administration? What?
Ben? Yeah. Look, this may not matter for the election, but it's going to matter for history. A black woman went out there, 90 minutes later, nobody, you might like her answer, you know, I like this, like, nobody is saying she could not be president of the United States. She cleared that bar. It is off the table, and that's important because this is a moment in history in which that is an issue. Also, she started strong. She beat the crap out of him on COVID. It was embarrassing, and she ended strong on justice. In the middle, she had to walk that tightrope that you've seen women of color and all women have to walk, of being strong but not too strong, being firm, and she got run over by Pence over and over again. The moderator did nothing about it, but she kept her poise, she kept her composure, and she did great tonight.
Yeah, I would make the comment that I don't think that's what was going on. No offense to your comment about being a woman of color. I think this was a much simpler calculation. Play it safe. You got a big lead. You do not want to do anything that could create a moment. And pushing back and being.
He's got the same shoes on.
She was
You
not
see his shoes?
assertive throughout this.
He's got a suit on with the same shoes.
I mean, in many,
It's good. Was a mansplainer in chief.
I get it.
Mike mansplainer all
I
night.
understand that, but either Kamala went in there with the, I think, and this is the advice I think they probably gave her. Don't create a moment where, you know, you're gonna all, you know, incite, you know, create friction, right? You want to be calm.
same
You want
shoes
to
on.
show that you're presidential. And so I think she
He's
just
a phony.
passed. I don't think it has anything to do with the color of her skin. I think it's your
A
10
bag of fruit with the same
you
shoes.
you want to get through this thing and not have a.
I'll
tell you what, if I'm doing the review of it and I'm seeing the Biden headquarters, the one thing that I think was really a lost opportunity was when he completely evaded the question on what their plan is for people with pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
That is the issue that took Republicans down in 2018. And that was a missed opportunity.
Because there is a good answer, and for some reason, this administration, which has in my opinion, a very good record on healthcare, all the things that they've done to improve Obamacare, candidly, and to reduce price, they have. Oh my goodness, they've done tons of things by executive order to actually make Obamacare, the exchanges work better, and to expand plans. They've done tons of things.
Aren't they suing the Supreme Court?
So why he didn't talk about that, I have no idea. Here's my overall take, because I was responding to your thing. My overall take is that I think Pence made the best case, which I hope he had done, the best case possible for COVID. You guys don't think it was a compelling one? I think for a lot of people, it was a good case. He made and he compared it rightfully to Obama's record on H1N1, which would have been disastrous had it been anywhere close to as virulent as this. So I think, again, I don't think he won it. I think he made a plausible case for them. I think issue by issue, my opinion is, he did everything that conservatives wanted him to do, and made people feel really comfortable.
Yeah,
and
time.
I think people were looking for quote substance. Mike provided a lot of substance. Kamala, in my opinion, was sort of weak on substance. Most of her scoring points were going after Trump personally. It was him that where she really scored her points, not on substance. And one final thing I would say about that.
Fuck
She
off.
never once, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, she never once called Donald Trump President Trump. She referred to him always throughout the debate as Donald Trump.
Well,
he's the President of the United States, and not once.
Enough.
Trump.
You're gonna
Now, you can roll that off, but that's a big deal. I mean,
She was disrespected all night. She was run over all night. Listen, I don't think you guys are on a very strong ground talking about respect as your main issue. But what I will say is this: I do agree with you that Pence was masterful in normalizing conservative ideas. He kind of made conservatism seem normal again, and I think that was to his great credit. But I think what Kamala Harris had to go out there and do was to hang on to her base, which she did. To your point, she didn't have to go and score a knockout because they're up a gazillion points. But I don't want to take it off the table. A lot of people felt very uncomfortable with the moderation. They were uncomfortable with him taking up so much ground.
Yeah.
And they felt that she was in a trick bag. If she pushed back too hard, maybe it creates a moment, but also it creates the angry woman thing. And so I think she masterfully dealt with, I think, it's a terrible situation, and I think he took advantage of the situation.
And that the angry woman label, I mean, that is a real danger, and for a black woman, that is double.
So did you notice the smile that was on her face all the time when and that's hard when you're getting interrupted constantly, and then she would say, and maybe she did create a meme, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, right? And she kept saying that to him as if to say, I'm not finished, and then he would sort of plow ahead. And I think that women watching that, I mean, they have a huge gender gap, but women watching that are going to say, wait a minute.
Don't make the claim that he interrupted her repeatedly, because he didn't interrupt her repeatedly.
Well,
he did. He
interrupted the moderator and
he continued answering questions beyond her time.
Or not answering.
He didn't. Yeah, no, I'm
I need another bit of time to answer that.
He
actually did interrupt her. I mean,
he went on really
not
long.
more than you would see in any other debate.
I want to go. There was another point at which Mike Pence said to her, and this also struck me. And Rick, I bet you disagree, but he said to Kamala Harris, stop playing politics with people's lives. And you listen to that, and you look at what's going on in the country, and you look at Bob Woodward's book about what the president knew in late January or early February, and you look at the president now and the way he's handling COVID, and that coming from Mike Pence just struck such a note with me, like an are you kidding kind of thing. Who's playing politics with people's lives here?
One thing I thought that was really good, there was a question that was asked about health, about the physical health of the candidates.
Yeah.
Kamala turned it to the financial health and went after Trump on the taxes. And she said something in a way that I thought really resonated. She goes, you owe money to somebody. I think that gets cut there. She's like, hold on a second. You owe money to somebody. She did that a couple of times where she would take an issue that's been in the news and make it very, very relatable. And so I think that
same thing with foreign policy. I don't know if it was effective or not, but with foreign policy about it being about relationships.
Yeah, about relationships. She also talked about when they put a bounty on somebody's head, that means they're going to kill you and get money for it. So she was doing things. She has a base of people. Understand, you got a bunch of young voters, a bunch of new voters who are out there. She was speaking to them. She was educating them. So a lot of stuff she was doing that may have gone over some people's heads, but I think she did a brilliant job with her base.
Well, I mean, look, to say your foreign policy is about relationships, I mean, you want to talk about no substance? That's no substance. Zero substance on the issue.
Except when your opponent has been blowing up all around the world. That we spent blood and treasure to make those relationships around the world.
Pence did a great job of talking about NATO, how NATO has increased. He talked about our relationship with Israel.
Are you proud of our relationships right now around the world?
I think our relationships around the world are better now than they were under Barack Obama. Absolutely. No question in my mind.
Jesus.
Again, you guys may
What are you fucking smoking?
I tell you, conservatives feel that our relationships are better now.
Do the Kurds feel that way? Do the Kurds who President Trump abandoned and allowed to be murdered?
Don't even talk about the Kurds, because you want to talk about the Kurds, let's talk about abandoning Iraq and having ISIS come up and kill millions and kill thousands of Kurds. So no, actually we defeated ISIS, which was in the Kurdish area, and we have autonomous region that actually is doing well.
I'm going to tell you a couple of things. First of all, I think it's very, very clear that tonight Kamala Harris took you guys to the woodshed on the stuff that we care about the most in this country. When it comes to the economy, justice, and COVID. She was toe-to-toe with your best person. You said yourself, Mike Pence is the best guy you've got. He gave his best, and it was toe-to-toe on everything that counts. They didn't get enough into the foreign policy, but I don't see how you can sit here and say you're proud of what Donald Trump has done to our relationships, to our reputations around the world. It's absurd. And we are a laughingstock on planet Earth because of Donald Trump. He cannot
No,
be
get
trusted.
into it.
With the way that he pulled out on the Kurds was
Oh,
completely
it's right.
erratic. And he's just as erratic right now in the White House. Probably tweeting right now some stuff that makes no sense. Just up on Pence right now.
I can go down a laundry list of countries, man, if you want to, about how our relationships are far superior now than they were under Barack. Well, let's take Ukraine for one.
Well, let's go Putin. I guess Putin, you got a better relationship with Putin.
No. Actually, Ukraine, we actually are arming the Ukrainians as opposed to allowing them the Russians to invade and take Crimea.
But she
So
really-
there are real issues here, and you're blowing your
Fuck off.
contrast. You're missing. I mean, I think
Fuck off.
that Biden was not for taking out Osama bin Laden, criticized us taking out
Haven't we actually endangered the credibility of the new Ukrainian regime far more than any enemy could ever of Ukraine? I mean, the president has made the president of Ukraine look like a laughingstock.
Well, that was because of an investigation that took place with someone.
No, it's because he was trying to go up. Anyway, it's not. It's ancient history. But in terms of the debate, did this move the needle?
No, I don't think it did. I don't think it moved the needle at all. And I think it was probably pretty frustrating for people to watch because they got asked questions and they didn't answer them. And particularly Mike Pence, you know, when you get asked one question and then you want to pivot and turn to another question. Neither one of them talked about the age of their candidate, for example, and talked about the conversations they had or had not. Let me make a bet here, just saying, that Mike Pence has never had that conversation with Donald Trump. Let me
Nor is
just.
Kamala had it with Joe Biden.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I watched like 5 minutes of debate without any sound, which is
Yeah.
something I sometimes do in debates, and it's actually very.
And that last week.
Well, I think I actually did it for a bit, and it's very interesting what you actually pick up on. Every shot Kamala Harris, when she's looking at him, would smile. She had a smile on her face far more than Pence ever had a smile on his face. He had a bloody eye and a fly on his eye, and he does, you know, the sincerity thing, the look. Well, but I thought it was interesting how she was very loose, thoughtful in how she looked at him and how she looked at the moderator and her. You know, we've seen this before from her when she gave her first speech after being named as vice presidential nominee. You know, she gave a lot of it with a smile on her face, and I think that's clearly intentional.
She did. It's also true if you look back at the debate 4 years ago. This was a different guy. Pence was a different guy. He looked like he was on. Tonight, he looked to me, he oftentimes, particularly on subjects like COVID, looked like a guy who had been taken to the principal's office. He did not look like he wanted to be there. He was not the warm, sunny presence that we're accustomed to. I felt that he was playing defense much of the night. I also thought, by the way, it was odd that at the end, having made the case that Kamala Harris is radical left, he then assailed her for being too tough as a prosecutor.
Which I thought, I was surprised she didn't actually make that point, which is, wait a minute, 5 minutes ago I was radical left.
Well, but that was clearly oriented toward African American males, which is where.
Well, guess what, Rick? Everybody else was watching too.
What's that?
I said everybody else was watching too.
No, I understand. Look, I think to comment on Pence, like Pence felt the weight of the world after the last debate performance. I mean, the campaign was riding on this. I mean, I know, David, you think the race is over to begin with, but that a lot of the folks in the Trump Pence feel like they need to have at least a step where you stop the bleeding and you can come back, and it was on Pence's shoulders.
Did they get
I think he delivered. No, I think he delivered. I think you're right. He was not.
Yeah, well, you're talking through your ass.
As much as Mike has been in the past, but it's also a different time. It's a somber time. So I think he did, as I said before, everything that he needed to do to stop the bleeding. Whether he turned the campaign around, I doubt it. But he did what he needed to do.
He had one good riff on Gloria I thought his riff that he came to give on taxes on some of Biden's programs. He misrepresented Biden's program, but you knew he was going to attack them for being tax raisers and so on. And he seemed he was very much on the attack there. Most of the night he was on defense.
Can I just say something more about Kamala Harris's demeanor, since we're talking about it? I think she knew exactly what she had to do. She knew she was going to be interrupted. She knew this was going to be an issue. She's a seasoned prosecutor, and she's got a jury out there, and she's making her case, and she doesn't want to, they don't know her. They've known Mike Pence, but they don't really know who she is, and she introduced herself. She sort of took the opportunity to give her bio out there because most Americans don't know who she is. And I think she was smartly very careful to smile at Mike Pence, to her, you know, her demeanor was calm and reasoned. What?
Play it safe. That's what she did. She did.
Playing it safe.
It's all about tone.
But I think for a woman in particular, you know, when she sort of attacked Joe Biden during that debate, that may not have worked so well for her. And I think she's had that experience in the past and now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, it's insane that in this day and age, we still have the standard that women have to edit themselves in a different way.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Wolf.
All right, Anderson, thanks very much. I want to do some fact checking right now. I want to get to what we heard. Daniel Dale, our CNN fact checker, CNN reporter, standing by. Vice President Pence, Daniel, he echoed President Trump's claims about suspending travel from China early on to try to slow down the coronavirus pandemic. First of all, listen to this.
Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world.
All right, Daniel, is that accurate?
This is false, Wolf. I don't know how many times I have to say this on TV with you. President Trump did not suspend all travel from China. What Trump did, Wolf, was impose a partial travel restriction in early February. It exempted citizens, it exempted permanent residents, it exempted many of their family members. Flights from China were never fully banned, and tens of thousands of people kept flying over from China to the U.S. after the thing that Trump and Pence often call a ban was put into effect. Now, Wolf, it's also worth noting that there is good research suggesting these restrictions on China were not actually super effective. Research has found that the early U.S. outbreak in and around the New York City area was brought in largely by travelers coming through Europe, not China. So while Trump was restricting travel from China, say the front door in early February, he did not impose restrictions on Europe, say the back door, until March 13th, by which time the virus was already here and already spreading. So again,
this is the fucking leader of the COVID fucking virus fucking
that is just
task force.
We also heard, Daniel, the Vice President Mike Pence trying to cast some of the blame for the U.S. coronavirus response on the Obama administration, citing its response to the H1N1 flu pandemic. Listen to what he said.
In 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the Strategic National Stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan.
So, Daniel, was the Strategic National Stockpile of medical supplies depleted or empty?
Wolf, the claim is misleading. I'll explain why. It is not true that the national stockpile was entirely empty, as Pence said or strongly suggested when Trump took office. A spokesperson for the national stockpile for Trump's own administration has told me personally that they inherited more than 16,000 ventilators in good working order from the Obama administration. It also contained, for example, enough smallpox vaccine for every American. Now, journalists were allowed to tour the stockpile in late 2016. They personally saw piles of stuff on the shelf, so no, not empty. However, it is true that some supplies had run low. For example, the supply of N95 masks, that's important in a pandemic, of course, was low. It got depleted during the H1N1 pandemic. The health department said it needed to be replenished. It didn't happen. Now, that's in part because of congressional spending priorities, negotiations, etc. Not just Obama, but there is some truth to Pence's claim. So, bottom line, misleading. It's wrong to say empty. It certainly wasn't entirely bereft of stuff, but it was indeed low on some supplies, Wolf.
We did, our producers did some math, and they found that nearly identical speaking times for these two candidates. Take a look at this: 36 minutes, 24 seconds for Kamala Harris. Mike Pence, 36 minutes, 27 seconds. Very, very equal amounts of time. Jake, Dana, Abby, back to you.
Thanks, Wolf. We were talking before about whether or not Senator Kamala Harris left some opportunities on the table purposely, because perhaps she went into the debate knowing of some gender and racial roles and dynamics that make people of color have to hold back. Not that they should, but that they feel like they have to in this country. And a source close to the campaign, after we had this conversation, texted me and said that Senator Harris went into the debate aware of the various dynamics that we talked about, racial and gender dynamics, and knowing she had to thread the needle and balancing being assertive and letting it go at points. Women are judged differently. It's a needle we have to thread all the time. And of course, she has been the only woman and the only black woman in many spaces. So just what we were talking about.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, you know, she's had to thread, she has had to thread that line several times in the past. One of the interesting differences between tonight compared to what we've come to see from Kamala Harris in the primary debates was that she became known for creating moments, whether it was with Joe Biden or at other debates, even known for creating moments in the Judiciary Committee.
Sure, with Attorney General Barr.
Exactly. We didn't see that Kamala Harris tonight. We saw a different Kamala Harris tonight, in part, I'm told, because the objective here was very different. She came in here believing that it was about holding her own, steady, stable, executing on the plan, not creating, you know, social media moments that people have come to expect from her. And that might be a disappointment, frankly, to some of her fans on Twitter. But from the perspective of the campaign, I think you'll hear a lot of people saying, in terms of what they prepared for, she executed on that.
Although, I'm still speaking was a line that is very memorable. People who are near her are, you know, happy that that was something that she got out. She obviously prepared that when the vice president was going to interrupt her. And I can see that resonating a lot with women. You know, that here was, you know, a guy on the stage with her trying to kind of talk over her, and she stopped him and she looked at him and she said, "I'm still speaking." I can already see the Biden campaign making a t-shirt out of that.
Yeah, a couple things. I think I agree with Senator Santorum, who I can't help but notice is a lot more excited about talking about Vice President Pence than he has been about talking about Pence's running mate. But I think I agree with him in the sense that she played it safe, but that's what you would expect if you believe the polls. The Biden-Harris campaign is winning, and the Trump-Pence campaign is losing. And if you look at who was more aggressive and really did more oppo dumping in terms of just bringing up votes from and her record as an attorney general or as a district attorney, that's the campaign that's behind, and that's Pence.
And these are people who are not at the top of the ticket. I mean, this is the vice presidential debate. Yes, it is different for all the reasons we have discussed, not the least of which is that the men at the top of the ticket are in their 70s. And, you know, this is incredibly important because they could be the future of their respective parties. But it is a vice presidential debate. So it is, if you're Kamala Harris, do no harm right now.
I really want to know what you think about Senator Harris's response when it came to the vaccine, if there is a coronavirus vaccine. And she said that because people criticized her for undermining whether or not the concept of whether or not she should take the vaccine, she said she'd be first in line if the medical professionals, the health professionals advocate it, but if it's just Donald Trump, nope, she's not going to take it.
This was a do-over for her, and she executed it line for line, word for word, exactly what I'm sure they prepared her to say. If the scientists say it's safe, I'll be the first in line to take it. If Donald Trump says so, I will not. That's the message. And Pence ignored what she said and continued to accuse her of undermining the science, even though the president just this morning tweeted that he wants a vaccine before the election because it's before the election.
And President Trump also opposes vaccines in general.
Exactly. So I do think that she took the opportunity to redo that line, and I think it worked well for her tonight. You know, Pence, to our earlier conversation, had a lot more work to do tonight because the last debate with President Trump, you couldn't hear what was being said to so much as understand what the Trump argument against Biden was. And I thought tonight, because of the calm nature of this debate on both sides, they were a lot more toned down. You could hear the arguments, and that was effective for Pence because he actually needed to deliver these lines on China. He needed to deliver these lines on the Green New Deal. He needed to deliver these lines on taxes. And these messages did not come across last week, and the Trump-Pence campaign is a little bit behind the 8 ball on this.
It sounds to me like you're saying that
A little.
succeeded.
He succeeded in executing the Trump-Pence talking points.
Yeah.
Did he answer the questions? No, he did not.
Right.
But if debates are about delivering your message to the American public, Mike Pence is, to quote President Trump, very effective of not even coming close to the question and talking and talking and talking and delivering his talking points. And, you know, it's up to the American people at this point which version of this they want to take home and believe.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that because we have not seen Kamala Harris in this kind of situation, obviously we've seen her in interviews and on the stump with Joe Biden, but this is the first time that she's really had to meld her record and her beliefs and Joe Biden's. Obviously, Joe Biden's wins out. And that one moment where she looked at the camera and said explicitly that Joe Biden does not want to ban fracking, which is a big, big issue in places like Southwest Pennsylvania where they're doing well. But that was really interesting because in the primaries, she did want to ban fracking. And so now she is falling in line, as running mates do, with the guy at the top of the table.
I do have to say, though, I still think that the major 3 issues as to why people are going to vote and how they're going to vote are the coronavirus response, the economy, and healthcare. And when it comes to the coronavirus response, Vice President Pence was unable to answer the question, why is our death rate so much higher than any other Western country? Why is the number of corpses we have here so much higher than any other wealthy country? He just was unable to answer that question, and he was forced to create an alternate reality where the H1N1 flu under President Obama was as bad and as deadly as coronavirus, and projecting out what that would have looked like. That's not planet Earth. That's not what we're living on. I mean, maybe that's great if in a Ray Bradbury version of the coronavirus vaccine.
Right, you don't get to choose which version of the reality you live in, and I think one of the things that perhaps Harris was trying to execute on in this debate tonight was just saying to the American people in response to those things, what is your life like today, right now? And you don't really even have to make a comparison between the two, because we all sitting here lived through H1N1, and I don't remember the economy shutting down. I don't remember quarantining, wearing a mask, or doing anything like that. I don't even know a single person who contracted the H1N1 flu. I know countless people who have contracted COVID-19. So
President Trump is one of them.
Including the President of the United States. So I do think that
Jake
from Pence really skirted the question, and just putting aside the politics of it, in this moment that we are living in, I do think the American people deserve real answers from Vice President Pence, from President Trump, about why we have gotten to this point and what they're going to do about it from this point forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. The fact that she kept going back to the fact that the president and the vice president knew early on, particularly the president, leaning on the Bob Woodward tape, because why wouldn't she? It would be malpractice if she didn't. And then looking into the camera and saying to the American people, you don't have to be in this mess as much as you are. You don't have to have your kids in virtual school the way that they are now. If they would have actually acted in a much more robust way on what they knew, then things would be different. I'm sure that was effective.
I mean, I think it was effective, but I don't think she did it enough, to be honest. I mean, if politics is about the repetition of your talking points, the repetition of the arguments you're trying to make so that they get through to the American people, because let's be honest, first of all, most Americans did not watch the debate. Second of all, if they were watching, they were probably on their phones, they were doing other things, they were putting their kids to bed, they were in and out of the living room. You really have to say it a few times. She said it, I think, twice.
She didn't have a fucking time to.
Because she was answering the questions.
Well, that's the thing. She was answering the questions. It was in this very room at the very beginning of the Trump presidency. I think it was Vice President Pence was Vice President-elect Pence, and they had just fired Michael Flynn's son from the transition because he was out there pushing crazy Pizzagate nonsense. And I told Vice President Pence, he was doing this, and did you know that they put in for a security clearance for him? And Pence refused to answer my question 8 times. There was a shamelessness about him in terms of his, like how much he doesn't answer questions that actually is very effective, whether or not you appreciate it. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. I want to go to our fact checker, Daniel. Daniel, the candidates clash over jobs, manufacturing, trade with China. I want to play one exchange.
The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs.
I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden's been a cheerleader for communist China over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic.
So Daniel, did the candidates get the facts straight on manufacturing?
Anderson, this exchange was kind of a mess on both sides. I'm going to start at the beginning. So Senator Harris said that 300,000 manufacturing jobs were lost because of Trump's trade war with China. Before the pandemic, there was actually a net gain under the Trump presidency of 483,000 manufacturing jobs. Now, many economists do believe that the trade war did cause some jobs to be lost and prevent further gains, but I haven't seen a credible estimate that because as many as 300,000 losses. Now, Pence then said that 200,000 manufacturing jobs were lost under Obama and Biden. This, Anderson, is misleading by omission. Those losses occurred because Obama inherited a steep recession with manufacturing jobs plummeting. It was well underway when he took office. And the number of jobs kept falling until about a year into his tenure, more than 1 million lost in his first year alone. But then the trend reversed, and between March 2010 and the end of the Obama-Biden tenure in 2016, more than 900,000 were added. So no, Obama did not give up on manufacturing jobs. And relatedly, Pence, like Trump, claimed that Obama explicitly said manufacturing jobs were just gone, you couldn't bring them back. That's also misleading. Obama said at a 2016 PBS town hall that some were gone for good, but he also boasted of how many were being created under his leadership. Now, finally, Pence then boasted of 500,000 manufacturing jobs created in the first 3 years of the Trump presidency. Well, that's true. It was 483,000 as of February, but Pence ignored what happened in year 4, and that is the number of manufacturing jobs plummeted because of this pandemic. Through September, it's now a net loss of 164,000 manufacturing jobs since Trump took office. So, bottom line, Harris was kind of misleading with the first stat. Pence was misleading in a number of respects with his last 3 claims, so neither of them was even close to perfect. Anderson?
All right, Daniel Dale, thanks very much. Van, what happens tomorrow? Does the race change at all after this?
Well, look, I don't think there's going to be a big shift or anything like that, but I think what you're going to see is further consolidation, because I guarantee you within 24 hours, we're not going to be talking about any of the nice things that Pence said. He was very smart, everybody. Trump will do something nutty, and then we'll be in some other situation. But I want to just say, because I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, you have a lot of people who are, they finally got a chance to see what a debate is supposed to be. Don't forget, every presidential race brings in new people, new voices, people who've never done this before, and this is how it's supposed to be. I think we actually got a little bit of credibility back as a political class tonight because of the class act from Kamala Harris.
I've heard that Vice President Biden is fundraising off of the fly.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how, but I think that
The fly swatter. With like
Is that right?
picture of a,
There it is.
picture of a. The question that I have about the fly, just a little humorous interlude here, which is.
You're winging it, huh?
That's such a dad joke.
I know.
Oh, Joe's got the bloody fly swatter. Get on your mate.
Did he know the fly was on his head and just not
No, he
touch
didn't.
it?
No, I just don't.
Or, well, it's Mike Pence. I don't know.
Not touch the fly and say.
No, I don't know. It's just so.
I hope it goes into quarantine, because. But in terms of the race, I mean, does anything change?
No, I really don't think so. I think Kamala Harris did very well tonight. She had a better argument to make, too, on the things that people cared about, and I think she executed on that. Pence maybe he gave some comfort to Republicans who were worried that an avalanche was about to take them all down. And in that sense, maybe that will be the case. But no, I don't think it changes anything. One thing I want to say as someone who's prepared people for, or helped prepare people for debates, this idea of not answering questions. Every time you prepare for a debate, there is an element of here's how we're going to deal with this, and sometimes you want to get into it and sometimes you don't. But generally, you make some passing effort to acknowledge the question. And I think the thing that was probably troubling to people watching the debate tonight was particularly when Pence just completely ignored it and just drove past it and said, no, I'm not going to even bother making a pass it.
And as someone who was guilty to a fault of answering every question I was ever answered directly.
That's why you're with us.
That's why I'm sitting here today. I am not going to criticize someone.
That's why we like having you here.
Okay? So, good job, Mike Pence. I would agree that on a couple of occasions, most of the time he did it, it's because he wanted to comment on something from the previous question, not because he was trying to dodge the question, but because he had something about the last question that he didn't get a chance to respond to. So, and that's perfectly legitimate to do.
Yeah, but when he was asked about whether he would accept the result of the election, he didn't answer that. He went back and said, well, you guys have been trying to delegitimize us.
And which I think was number one, that was a great answer. But he didn't then follow up and answer the question, which he should have. And that was a big mistake. And David, you don't give much credence to this. I think it is a huge issue that on a fundamental issue like whether you're going to pack the United States Supreme Court, that you can't get an answer out of a major presidential candidate, that you're going to change the balance of power and the constitutional structure of this country.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just telling you, that is not going to fly. I'm sorry, no pun intended.
I mean, I think after last week we should have had a better answer than the non-answer that she gave. I understand the politics of it, but I think they should. But what I would say to you is I don't think this election is going to turn on that issue. We're right in the middle of a 100-year pandemic, and we feel like we're adrift. And on the major things that are on people's minds today, I think that she had an edge tonight.
But there was one answer. I want to say that we're talking about him not answering stuff. There was one answer that he gave that I think was bad. He said there's no systemic racism. He went there. I don't understand what they're doing on this question of race. On the one hand, they seem to be trying to go after black male support, as you mentioned earlier. On the other hand, that is a stick in the eye to every African American parent raising a kid. All of us are terrified about the way our kids are treated in schools. If little Johnny throws an eraser, he's being precocious. If little Leroy throws an eraser, he's being violent. We have to deal with this every single day with our kids. And I just do not understand why Mike Pence, if they want to get African American male support, they got to cut that crap out. There is systemic racism. It doesn't mean America's a terrible country. America's a great country, but it's got a big problem on this issue. I thought it was a terrible answer he gave.
But how can he say it if Donald Trump hasn't said it? I mean, this is Mike Pence, who's not going to cross Donald Trump. He's never going to disagree with him. It's not a surprise that he would answer that way, right? Because the president has said it to him.
I need to get something in here because Jake was right that healthcare and COVID and the economy are the big three issues Americans care about. And I think that the vice president did a poor job in articulating what this administration has done on healthcare, and it's a lot. I know Van is dismissing, but this is what I follow closely. They've done a lot, and whether he doesn't know or can't articulate it is a huge problem, and Trump's got to fix that. But I would say on the other side, if you listen to the substance of what Kamala Harris said about what they would do with COVID, it is absolutely no different than what the president.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. But the point is, you can't say, well, they're terrible, and because they're not effective, we're going to do the same thing and be better, and say, no, I think you really missed the ball.
Yeah, I think what she missed is, I think that's a fair argument that, if you look at the nuts and bolts, that
same thing.
You say that there are similarities. What would be different was that not being completely reckless, both in personal behavior and also in undercutting the scientists at every step and politicizing the scientists.
And this is the point that I've been making on this panel for a long time. It's not what President Trump does, because Biden's not going to do anything different than Trump does.
Well,
It's how he communicates it.
No, it's not communicating. No. It's far beyond communicating.
Fucking get out in the real world.
It's putting the thumb on scientists and actually having, folks in HHS squash.
This is a very important point to me. I think that the Trump administration as a whole does not understand one thing. For an ordinary person, your actions speak louder than your words. That is true. But when you're the President of the United States, your words speak way louder than your actions. And when you have a President of the United States who's pulling his mask off and doing all sorts of stuff, it has a profoundly destructive effect. And they also didn't use their power to get the industry on the side of PPE. There's a lot of stuff that they did not do that Biden would have done.
The major point here, he does have a communications problem. He was told that this was a deadly virus, and he forgot to communicate it to the American people.
He didn't forget.
And that is the essence of it. Rick, you can shake your head, but we went through months of hell because the president sat on his on this information. He did not. He told us it was like a flu,
and even right now
it was a cold. Even after he told Bob Woodward it is deadly, it is 5 times more deadly than the flu. How can you withhold that information?
Well, he's also currently covering up what actually happened. He is refusing to allow his doctor to say when his last negative test was. He's covering up the history of this. He very well may have stood on the stage knowingly positive with COVID, spewing and yelling at Joe Biden 6 feet away, spewing who knows what. That's completely
You're talking about character. Hold on. But you're talking about character. You're talking about behavior. I'm talking about policy.
If somebody,
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just saying, if you look at the policy as opposed to
no, that's not true. The policy is telling the CDC director, you know what, your get back to school policy guidelines are too tough. You got to rewrite them.
And by the way, with all due respect, the president has the right to do that. He runs the country.
But what
the
about
CDC doesn't run the country. He has a right to say to the CDC.
So you're fine with Donald Trump.
Fucking idiot.
With the president
paragon of recklessness. You know what? There are gay people in this country who are HIV positive, and in some states they can be arrested if they don't inform a sexual partner that they are HIV positive, even though if they're on medication, it's absolutely zero threat to any sexual partner. None if they're on medication. They cannot transmit the virus. In America, in several states, they can be sent to jail because of that. Donald Trump is out there possibly infecting people. He could have infected Joe Biden on the stage, and it's not that. He's not.
I'm not arguing with you about the president's character. I'm arguing about the policy decisions.
No,
he's
putting his thumb. What's happened to him in this country and in our politics is that his character now, the cost of it is clear. When you subjugate public interest to your political interest to the degree this president has on this virus, and people's lives are lost because of it, that's not just a character problem, that's a policy problem.
Are you telling me that Barack Obama followed every advice from every advisor he ever had and never changed it if an advisor came forward?
Let me tell you something. On public health issues, he took his guidance from public health experts, and that is the difference.
Well, let me just say one thing on policy, because just recently, maybe it was yesterday, the President of the United States tweeted, or maybe it was today, tweeted that the FDA was slowing down purposefully and without any scientific reason, apparently, he thinks, the vaccine because it insisted on going through a couple of months of approval process. So you have a President of the United States, everyone wants a vaccine.
Complained about an agency.
Everyone wants a vaccine in this country, but you have the president telling the scientists and the doctors they don't know what they're doing and that they are somehow slowing it down for political reasons. This was his, this was his insinuation, or maybe he stated it slightly.
But what happened?
They did it.
They did.
They did what they wanted to do. But, but who knows what Donald Trump's next step is, because does he have the Does he have the power to overrule the FDA? So maybe he will. Stay tuned.
All right, let's go back to Wolf. We'll have more ahead.
All right, Anderson, thank you. Undecided voters often watch these debates, like the one we saw tonight, to try to help them make up their minds. We have a group of undecided voters in the battleground state of Arizona. They've been watching the vice presidential debate. Sarah Seidner is with them in Phoenix. So, Sarah, what did the voters think of the candidates' performances?
Yeah, it's really interesting. They thought it was a good debate overall, but let's ask them. Let's go ahead and talk to Tyler here. You're 19 years old. This is your first time voting in a presidential election. In one word, describe to me the performance of Vice President Pence.
Shifty.
Shifty. Okay.
Shifty.
And now we're going to go back behind you to Deborah. Deborah, tell me, you have in the past, I think you voted for President Trump back in 2016. You are now on the fence, undecided. In one word, describe to me what you thought of Vice President Pence's performance.
Confident.
Okay. So you've got Tyler Shifty, we've got Deborah, who is saying confident. Let's go back now here to, let's see, who is in the back here? Sam. Sam, you're back here. I saw you a little bit nodding and engaging as you're watching this. One word to describe how Vice President Pence did.
Not sincere.
Okay. So Shifty, confident, not sincere. Morgan, front row. You were very engaged as well. I was watching you going up and down with your device. What did you think of Vice President Pence in one word?
Stubborn.
Stubborn. Okay. All right, Judy, we've got you back here. You voted for President Trump, I think, in 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
You're on the fence, but leaning towards Trump. What did you think of his vice president?
Overtime.
What did you say?
Overtime. He kept stealing her time.
Okay. So going at the time, taking, interrupting and going at the time. Okay. All right. Joseph, you are back here. I think you are leaning towards Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What did you think of Vice President Trump's performance?
He was evasive.
Evasive. Okay. All right. We have Bob here, who's sitting in the front. Bob, you were listening intently. What did you think of the Vice President?
Polished.
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 Very
Oh, we got a wanker.
how he performed.
A bald-headed wanker.
You have sort of talked to me a little bit about how important this vice presidential debate is to you. What did you think of Vice President Pence?
Calculated.
Calculated, okay. Now we have you, Cody. You're also a first-time voter for the presidential election. You were leaning, I think, towards Trump. What did you think of his vice president?
Confident.
Confident. So we've got two confidents. And last but certainly not least, Dennis. You've been sitting back here patiently, ready to talk. One word to describe Vice President Pence.
I'll describe it as consistent because there was nothing new, no surprises.
Okay. Nothing new, no surprises. Now, we should also mention that there weren't any really huge moments except for one, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I also should mention that we have talked to these folks and sort of canvassed them about whether or not this debate has helped them decide who they're going to vote for in the 2020 election. Got some good answers. I'm going to toss it back to you, Wolf Anderson.
You know, the undecided voters, Sarah, they had some strong reaction to the discussion about the coronavirus. Both men and women agreed with Senator Harris's criticism of the Trump administration's response. Before we show you that, take a look at how the voters' reactions will appear at the bottom of your screen. Men's responses are in green, women in yellow. When the lines go up, that means this group liked what they heard. If the lines go down, this means the group didn't like the candidate's answer. Now let's listen to those key moments for Senator Harris. Watch this.
And they knew what was happening and they didn't tell you.
Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage to be a leader, speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves.
All right, so Sarah, why did that moment resonate with the undecided voters?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That was a very strong performance. The men, by the way, if you watch throughout the debate, the men tended to be much more decisive, much more emotional about what they strongly agreed with, and they went up quite a few times. I'm going to start back here with Dennis. Dennis, Kamala Harris, this was a strong reaction from the men, as much as anyone, but the women as well, strongly reacted when Kamala Harris sort of went on the attack and said, look, the president knew very early on, before the American public, that indeed COVID was dangerous and he hid that from the public. What did you think of that response?
Well, hiding it from the public, or perhaps trying to protect the public from fear, maybe the terms that I might use. But I will also say that, we're talking about the large number of deaths that we had. If we look at Americans in general, we're not really a whole bunch of conformists, and so I think we may have contributed to that, not because the president didn't take any specific action or enough action, but perhaps because we independently maybe didn't think it was necessary or hadn't bought it seriousness yet.
Let me follow up with you, talking about the American public sort of wanting to have things their own way, and they don't always follow all the rules that are put out for them. Do you think that the president has something to do with that? Because he was refusing to wear a mask or saying it wasn't that big a deal. You wouldn't see him wearing a mask often. Do you think he played into the American idea that, like, I don't have to do this?
Well, I think some Americans might have read that, for sure, is that it wasn't serious in that respect. But let's face it, Pence was thrown into the limelight when he started running the coronavirus task force, and it was very straightforward. They had the science there. They had the facts and the science, and they seem to be working with it.
Okay.
I trusted it.
Thank you very much for your answer. We're going to go to Anessa. Anessa, what did you think of Kamala Harris, Senator Harris's response when she said, you all knew this and you kept it from us and put Americans in danger?
I think it was valid of her to bring up. However, I don't necessarily agree that that the president was jeopardizing Americans. I feel like Americans do their own research. They're well aware of what was going on with the virus. And I think Trump did, as soon as he was aware of the severity of it, I mean, they did put together a task force. They did what they could. So that's what I think.
Okay, and that's very good. Joseph, I'm going to go to you. What were your thoughts on that exchange there?
I thought that it was a very valid comment because it's true. For me, when you're telling a reporter that it's very bad, you can get it through the air, and there are recommendations, and you're not following them, and you're downplaying them, and then consistently pushing the other way. I felt that that was irresponsible of the administration, and they need to own it, that we didn't really believe in masks, and we didn't believe in doing anything preventative except staying at home when we knew that it was really bad, and we knew it was bad early.
Okay.
And to blame it on China, it's our fault because we didn't do our own research and we didn't push to make sure that we were protecting the American people, and just being upfront and letting us make the decision, telling us that it's going away, it's going to be fine, it is not acceptable.
Do you feel like you were lied to?
Yes.
Okay. So you heard there sort of the differing ideas of how this went down, but that was a very, very strong reaction from this group.
Well, Sarah, do the voters there with you think there was a clear winner tonight?
I'm going to ask that question. Show of hands. How many of you think that there was a clear winner tonight in this debate? 1, 2 out of 10. Only 2 out of 10. So there's your answer, Wolf. Only 2 out of 10 people thought there was a clear winner. And I'm going to ask them now who they think it was. How many of you think that Vice President Pence won this debate? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 people out of 10. How many of you think Kamala Harris won this debate? Senator Harris, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a tie. 4 people think, and then there are obviously people, we only have 8 people who think so. The other people who have not raised their hands, it was a wash. But 4 people think Kamala Harris won this debate, and 4 people out of 10 think that Vice President Pence won the debate.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Sarah, thank you. Thank the voters for us as well. Coming up, we're going to get the first results of our instant poll of debate watchers. Did they see a clear winner tonight? We'll be right back.
Air Quality Update in association with Copernicus, Europe's Eyes on Earth.
did you think it went from what you saw?
Oh, she won easy. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's not gonna fly.
That was excellent.
Yeah, that was a good time. Yeah, all you know.
Here, what's his name? Who was it? Anderson. Maybe the fly should go into quarantine.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's classic.
Yeah. Yeah. Just it was a lot better than last week.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe because that fucking Trump wasn't there. You watch him today.
Oh fuck. Oh. Huh?
He'll claim victory today. Trump. Oh yeah, what easy. I can't believe some of them fuckwits they got in that crowd.
Is electrician still here?
Eh?
Is Diego still here?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did the walls look?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might have to sweep up the mess he's made later.
Yeah.
He's got a thing on the floor.
Yeah. Well, I'll sweep it up tonight.
Put the shit in a bucket or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah.
Then we'll throw it in the bin.
So apparently the next debate might be next week sometime.
Oh no, there won't be another debate. Not with fucking Trump. He's got the virus. They won't even fucking entertain it.
She was giving us their take on how the vice presidential candidates did tonight. Let's go to David Chalian. He's got the results. David, what are the results? Who won?
Before I get to the results, Wolf, I just want to remind you, this is a poll of debate watchers, not representative of the country overall, of those folks who watched the debate tonight. And our sample of folks who watched the debate tonight leaves a little more Democratic, about 38% Democrats in this poll, 33% independent, 29% Republicans. So the audience was a bit more Democratic. Now for the results, Kamala Harris, the clear winner, according to debate watchers in our flash poll. 59% say she won the debate tonight. 38% say Mike Pence won the debate tonight. And here's some evidence to back that up. What winning a debate means: improving your position from where you went in. Take a look. We asked about whether people had a favorable opinion before the debate of both candidates and after. Look at the progress that Harris made. Before the debate, 56% said they had a favorable opinion of her. After the debate, 63%. She increased her favorability by 7%. Mike Pence held steady. He didn't lose any ground, but he didn't make up any ground. 41% before the debate favorable, 41% after the debate favorable. The critical question for a VP candidate: are they qualified to be president? Can they step into that top job? 63%, nearly 2/3 of debate watchers will say yes, Kamala Harris is ready and qualified to be president. And Mike Pence, the sitting vice president of the United States, he scores equally as well in that category. 65% say he is ready and qualified to be president. Only 34% of debate watchers said that he is not.
And we're going to give you some more results shortly from you as well. I know you're going through the numbers right now. David Chalian, thank you very much. Let's go back to Jake, Dana, and Em.
Thanks, Wolf. So one of the interesting moments, Dana, considering especially that this is an administration in which President Trump has, in front of everybody, leaned on the CDC and the FDA to help him get reelected by getting a vaccine out or therapeutics out or whatever. To the point that people who work at the CDC and FDA are worried about their agencies being tainted. One of the interesting moments was Vice President Pence telling Senator Harris not to play politics with the coronavirus vaccine.
I mean, it was the ultimate brazen move by the vice president. You know, we're used to seeing and hearing the guy at the top of the ticket project. That's kind of one of his moves, that when there's something happening to him or something that is, you know, either bad or a liability or just just generally things that happened, he says, okay, that this is happening to somebody else. And that's exactly what Vice President Pence did tonight. I mean, the idea that he had the gall to say to Senator Harris, please don't stop playing politics with or with people's lives about the coronavirus is, I mean, I don't know how she held it together to not respond to that one.
You know what really strikes me about that moment in particular, but several other moments in tonight's debate? Mike Pence says exactly the same thing that Donald Trump says, but in a more polished demeanor. They're not on different pages on the substance of these issues, and that's actually one of the reasons Mike Pence has remained in such good standing with this president. It's the way that he says it, but in this case, it's so obvious that that is not true. It is not an accurate reflection of what is actually happening in the world, and yet I think some people might be lulled into just listening to it and just, well, that was said very nicely, even though it's clearly untrue.
Well, same thing with when he started talking, Abby, about when it came to climate change.
Right.
He wants to follow the science.
This was another clear moment in which Pence is saying something that is consistent with the president's position in some respects, refusing to answer whether he believes climate change is an existential threat to humanity, then claiming that they're going to follow the science, but not acknowledging that the president on television, on live television, just a couple of weeks ago, questioned an actual scientist telling him that climate change is contributing to wildfires in California and in the West. The president was on national television and said, I don't think the science really knows anything about this.
Oh, while he was in California,
While he was in California, after ignoring the wildfires for several weeks. Look, just because it's being said with a pleasant demeanor doesn't mean that it's true, and that was one of those clear cases where, this administration's position, this president's position on climate change is not one where they let the science lead.
No, and of course that was misrepresented to the voters tonight. Something else that was misrepresented to the voters, the Republican Party and the Trump-Pence administration are very clear when it comes to Roe versus Wade, the landmark ruling in the Supreme Court in 1973 that made abortion legal. Their goal, and President Trump has stated this, is to appoint anti-abortion judges to the Supreme Court, such as Kavanaugh or Gorsuch, or now Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and have them eventually overturn Roe v. Wade. That is their stated goal. President Trump has said that. Mike Pence, this evening, said that he was very proud to be pro-life, but refused to acknowledge that this is the plan, even though it is the plan, and if you're proud of it, even though polls suggest that the majority of the country is not supportive of that position, you should just state it.
That was the one area where he did try to thread the needle a bit and pull back from the stated goal of the administration. For the most part, aside from that moment, maybe one other, he, as you said, he was saying Trump things, but sounding very, very different. And it's because he's much more of a traditional politician, although he is, unabashedly, anti-abortion, pro-life in his words. He understands the dynamics of the political landscape, and to say it that, bluntly, might not be the best thing for the kinds of voters that they're trying to reach now. Not the voters that they already have, the kinds of voters that they're trying to reach now.
But that's I still find that to be so interesting, because ultimately, Republicans make the argument that the courts are such a strong issue for them. It is a galvanizing issue for their voters. Although we should note, a lot of recent polling shows Democrats are at least equally motivated by the courts, at least they tell pollsters that, as Republicans are. But given that they have the votes for an Amy Coney Barrett in the Senate, and there's really no feasible way for Democrats to block it, I'm with you, Jake. Why not just acknowledge that this is the plan? Republicans will say they believe that this is a center-right country that supports their position on these policies, and if that's the case, it's surprising that not only would Pence not say it, but even recently, President Trump has been trying to dodge this issue, trying to say he hasn't really talked to his court nominees about this issue, when you know that this is a central issue for Republicans when they're choosing these.
Because the gender gap right now isn't a gap; it's just a huge.
It's a chasm.
It's a chasm.
Yeah.
And that's A, and B, it's also the suburbs where they're bleeding votes in swing states all over the country, and as much as they are pretty, obvious about saying what they want, they also understand that this is the politics of the moment, and that's why they're pulling their punches.
Something else that both candidates this evening dodged was Susan Page had a very obvious question and a good question, which is, both of your running mates are in their 70s, Donald Trump 74, Joe Biden, I think 77. Have you talked to them about what needs to happen if you win and the senior citizen that you're running with needs to step down for health reasons or whatever? And neither of them answered the question.
I heard them answer the question. I thought Susan Page's questions were excellent, but this is one of those that I think it would have been great to have a follow-up.
I don't think she was allowed to do follow-up.
I agree. The format, the format of this debate seemed to be reflexively in response to what happened last week. You get 2 minutes uninterrupted, and that seemed to almost mean not even the moderator could press you to answer the question. But this is one that I think the American people really deserved an answer to. Have you had that conversation? And then the other part of the question is, do the American people deserve transparency about the health of these two candidates? There is no more moment more vivid than this one for why we need transparency. The president was just hospitalized a few days ago.
Yeah, and we still don't know his health condition, and we're still not getting straight answers. Still ahead. More results from our instant poll of debate watchers. Did men and women see the debate similarly, or were some of them on Mars and some of them on Venus? Stay with us.